Recovery on Air, the official podcast of Crossroads Addiction Rehabilitation. Candid discussion about addiction and recovery with the people who have lived it, along with input from experts on the journey from struggle to triumph. Laugh, cry, and be inspired. And now, your host for Recovery on Air, Donna Alexander.
Welcome to Recovery on Air, the show in which we try to break the stigma of addiction by talking about it. I am your host, Donna Alexander.
And I am your co-host, Dulce Mitchell.
And so in the studio today, we are honored to have Patrick Roland.
Hello, glad to be here.
So glad to have you, Patrick. He is a substance use disorder counselor at RiverSource, correct?
Correct.
And he is also the author of 3 different books. So, Patrick, we want to hear about your story of your addiction recovery, and then we got some other things that we're going to talk about. So,
okay,
the floor is yours.
So, my story is a lot about going from kind of being a person that was very bullied and abused to a person that has used that pain to create power, right? So my first memory growing up is being afraid to go to the bus stop because boys threw rocks at me. That kind of behavior continued all the way through school, high school, college. They called me the whipping boy in high school.
Wow.
In college, the very first week of the freshman year, I was walking to my dorm room from the bathroom, and about 4 guys grabbed me in masks and threw me into this room and pinned me down on the floor and started beating my face with these like socks that they had made. They were like kind of phallic socks, and to me, it's kind of gay that a bunch of straight guys made socks. But you know,
I agree with that totally.
like, you know, whatever. Like, do your thing. You do you, boo. But you know, there were consequences for that for them. And college actually was okay. I went to a small college in central Iowa called Central College. It's where my family's from. And I had a good experience there after that. But then I came back to here and I started my career as a journalist. I was a journalist for about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Ultimately,
Okay.
I was the editor of Echo magazine. Unfortunately, when you're bullied by people and you have a strained relationship with your father and you're attracted to men, which I am.
Me too.
Yes.
Me too.
And that's what I was being, that's what the rocks were about, right? I mean,
Right.
like they picked me out like a long time ago. But, you know, when you grow up like that, you don't know how to have healthy relationships with men. And unfortunately, I just was in one abusive relationship after another. Ultimately, a very physically abusive relationship coincided with this big job that I had. And when I was the editor of Echo magazine, I was a known person. Like, I hung out with celebrities at Hollywood parties, and I went on big trips that were free, and I got tickets to every play and concert and anything you can imagine. The mayor knew me by name, and we talked on the phone sometimes. I mean,
Is that here in
that's
Phoenix?
great.
yeah, that was here in Phoenix. This was in 2007 to 2009. And unfortunately, at the same time, I was in an abusive relationship and I was being beaten up just about every day, verbally, mentally, you know, physically also. And that coincided with my ego, which was huge because I had this big job. I was just lashing out at everybody, right? Because I couldn't lash out at my partner because he would hurt me if I did, right? So everything was out here, everywhere else, and I was drinking a lot too, and I got fired from that job, and it was 2009, and that was when the economy was really bad.
Yeah.
And journalism was kind of dying also, and so I was unemployed for about 2 years.
Still with
And-
that same guy?
Well, yeah, I told everybody. So this is where the addiction part starts. I told everybody that we had broken up, but I was meeting him in seedy hotels and
okay,
lying,
yeah.
and I was getting away with it. So I was a goody two-shoes. I went to Brophy. I got straight A's. I went to college right after high school. You know, I did all the right things, and then I was with this guy, and it was dangerous and bad and really stupid, actually. But I liked lying, and I liked getting away with lying. And the problem, though, is that I had this father who put me down all the time and made me feel really small. And, you know, living in his basement and being unemployed for 2 years really gave him license to, you know, not be happy with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was a really bad time. And, you know, at some point, this abusive guy, like, I don't remember if he dumped me or I dumped him it ended.
Yeah.
And I was unemployed and I didn't have this relationship, which fed, because when you're in an abusive relationship, you get addicted to it in the same way you get addicted to anything else. It's
That's
attention,
true. Yeah.
right? If somebody's going to leave you, you try to do something to make them stay with you, right?
Right.
So that was that. So the relationship was over. I'm living in my father's basement. I'm like 37 or 38. No, wait, 36, something, mid 30s. And I'm just like, I feel like a total loser. And I think, well, what should somebody like me do? And I literally get this idea that I'm going to become a drug addict because that is the best course of action for me. And so I'm a goody two shoes from Arrowhead Ranch who went to Brophy and doesn't know anything about drugs. So I put an ad up on Craigslist looking for
gosh.
someone to teach me how to do drugs.
Oh, no way. Did you seriously?
I did. All in code, of course.
Now, how did you know what kind of code to use for that?
I don't know. Apparently, I was a born drug addict because I knew exactly what to say.
Yeah.
In our culture, we call meth Tina.
Yes, we do.
So all my posts were like, looking to become a Tina Turner, show me how to dance, like stuff like that. That's what the ad said, literally. And somebody responded. And in November of 2010, I walked into this man's house and you know, at the very same time I started to use drugs, I sat with somebody who was kind and loving to me for the first time in my life, and we talked about music and art and sports and politics and love and all these big ideas while we were getting high.
Of course.
And you know, it just was it was the perfect storm. And so my early using was with just this person, Pac is what I called him, because I wanted him to be mysterious, like Big on Sex and the City.
Which I adore, Sex and the City.
And he was a Green Bay Packers fan, so that's where Pac comes from. And, you know, over the course of 3 years, the relationship developed. It started out as a weekend drug buddy thing to a marriage, right?
Right.
But we were not legally married because it was only 2014, and it would be a year before that would become legal. And you know, I lived there. All the bills were in my name. The only thing that wasn't in my name in the house was the lease, because he had already moved into the house when I moved in. And he never told anyone about me. He never came out to anyone. And all this kind of culminates in me finding him dead in our home on January 7th of 2014. Okay. And, you know, within about an hour, the Phoenix police were combing through my home, basically treating me like I was a criminal and asking me all these questions like I didn't belong in my own home. And I had all these like bills and stuff to prove that I lived there. But because I wasn't on a lease, they told me that I had to leave. And then this family.
That's insane.
It's insane, right?
Wow.
This family that I had never met comes into the house and take over. They take over the whole thing and basically treat me like I don't exist. And they basically make my home a war zone. Like the first day he died, they came into the house and took like everything out of it. Didn't even ask me what was mine. So they took stuff that was mine. Didn't care.
Were they okay with him being gay?
No, he never told anyone.
Taboo.
So
Yeah.
not only were they finding out that he was gay, you know, his death was related to drugs. He had a heart attack that was caused by meth toxicity. So
Yes.
they're finding out that he's gay, he's a drug addict, he's, you know, not really great things to find out, right? And so I was standing there because I lived there, and they were mad at me because they couldn't be mad at him because he was dead, right?
because you
So
were
unfortunately,
bad news.
that the thing that really broke me was the funeral, because that was my moment, right? That was my like, don't cry for me Argentina moment, right?
Right.
And I didn't get to have it. So
Right.
Yeah.
so I decided that I was going to show them because they had been so mean to me, and I started using really heavily. And unfortunately, you know, I wasn't ready for that. He was very protective of me, and when we used together, there was literally nothing bad that was ever going to happen to me, because he was a big, imposing football player kind of guy. And so all of a sudden, I'm this like goody two shoes, living in the drug world, and it just really wasn't my jam. And it got just really weird really fast. So I don't really want to talk about that whole, like, I mean, we all know what I did. So for about a year and a half, My drug use escalated from the weekend thing that started to
Right.
an everyday thing.
Are you working now, Patrick? Were you working at that time?
yeah.
Okay, so you were working before he passed away.
Yeah, I got a job actually right away when he and I got together at it was a big corporate job actually.
Yeah.
And I made a lot of money and it sucked the soul out of me.
Yes.
But I made a lot of money. And so in my addiction, it didn't really matter, right? 'Cause
Right.
my soul was sucked out of me anyway. So but that becomes an issue later on.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, so this all culminates. So I'm an everyday user. I turned 40 in 2015, and I get this really great idea to go to Vegas to go see Britney Spears and Mariah Carey in concert. And, it's supposed to be
Obsessed.
this, right?
Yeah.
Gay fever dream, right? So I get this, it sounds like a good idea. The problem is that I can't get on the plane before going without getting high.
Right.
And so instead of this really awesome weekend doing these really awesome things, I spend this really horrible weekend in Vegas doing really weird things and putting myself in really bad positions, and ultimately deciding after being awake for about 4 days that I was going to jump out the 26-story window of the hotel I was staying at, and decided to call my mom and tell her this. And I hung up the phone on her and I said, I would rather jump out this window than ever see you again. Click. And I don't,
geez.
Yeah. And I don't know how, because my mom was in the beginning stages of Alzheimer's, and I didn't tell her where I was. But about 10 minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and it was police, fire. I mean, the whole town came. There I was sitting on the floor of the Palms Hotel in Las Vegas on a Saturday night watching all these people, like women in evening gowns and men in suits, right? They're just having the time of their life because they're on vacation. And I'm crumpled up on a ball on the floor of this hallway talking to a paramedic. And, so my partner had died and my dad had just been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I was scared because I didn't have a good relationship with him. And my mom was starting to act weird, which became Alzheimer's. And so literally that's my whole family. And I thought my whole family was dying, and I didn't know how to handle that. And so I'm telling this paramedic this, and she says this thing to me that just kind of jolts me into instant, like, it's my moment of powerless. She said, how can you take care of anyone else if you can't take care of yourself? And I just had this moment where, oh my gosh, I have to accept the consequences of my actions, and I have to get sober. And luckily in Vegas, apparently, if you try to kill yourself, they don't arrest you. They put you in a mental institution.
Right. 72 hours?
Yep. Yeah. So I like to say that I got Britney Spears when I went to go see Britney Spears. Right? So I end up in this mental institution in Vegas. And, it was scary because, Vegas, we always think of Vegas as like the Strip, right?
Right.
Vegas is a big city. Vegas
yes, it is.
Like as big as Phoenix. Maybe not as big, but it's a big city. And so I end up in this mental institution clear on the other side of town, and I was there for more than 72 hours. I was there for like a week. So I had to prove that I wasn't crazy. And so, you know what? I made a decision that I was going to start showing up in a very intentional way. So when I went to art class, even though I'm not an artist, I decided that as long as I tried, I made a Picasso.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I decided that if I went to gym and we were shooting baskets and I tried to shoot the basket, I was Shaquille O'Neal because I tried, right?
Yeah.
And then, when we went to go share, I'm actually pretty good at talking, but I decided that if I shared in a good way, I was Oprah Winfrey, right?
Yeah.
So when you step into this intentional version of yourself, I literally stepped into my light, right? And so I get out of Vegas, I come back here, and, somehow my mom, again, who's in the early stages of Alzheimer's, before I had left, she had found this grief counselor for me. And it had been 1.5 years since he had died, and I had not gotten any counseling. I was that's what I did. And I remember sitting in front of her before I went to Vegas, and I said, I'm willing to talk to you about my grief and stuff like that, but I'm not going to stop using. I am not doing that. And she just looked at me and she said, and so I come back. Her name was Joan. Anyway, she's this older woman. She looked like Whitney Houston's mom. In the book, I call that chapter Sissy Houston. I tell her about Vegas, and she's like, "Oh, so I see you got hit by a 2x4, did you?" And I said, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, are you ready to do the work?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, Patrick, I can help you with the grief, but I don't know anything about drug addiction, and you're a drug addict, and if you're going to work with me, you have to go to one meeting a week." And I didn't want to go to one meeting a week. I had been in and out of the rooms, and it was during that year and a half when I was using. So I attracted really shady men, and I was desperate for attention from men because my partner was dead. So it always just ended up weird, and I just didn't have a lot of trust, but I was willing to take a suggestion in early recovery. And because I wanted to get better, I didn't want to hurt anymore. And so I went to that one meeting. I knew these people from 20 years ago in the 90s. My best friend at the time was in the program, and I hung around her enough to meet her friends, and they were all still sober. These women had 25, 26, 27 years of sobriety. And I called them up and I said, can I hang out with you guys? I'm going to die if I don't hang out with you guys. And they said, sure. And these older women, I called them my MILF posse. And every Friday night I went to this meeting. And then, as we do in recovery, we have celebrations, right?
Yes.
And one of them was having their birthday thing. And then I go to this thing, and right there is this girl, the one that had introduced me to all these people all those years ago. We'd had a falling out when we were both in mutual addiction. And this was the first time we'd seen each other in 5 years. And the seat next to her was the only one that was empty.
Of course it was.
Right? And we started talking. She said, Patrick, I think you'd like my home group. And so I started that. So then I was going to 2 meetings.
Oh, my.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
And so then, so about 4 months have passed, and I've been doing 5 months maybe. I'm doing that. And I'm still not all there, right? I'm 5 months sober, right? Right. So, and I'm still not very trusting of men. I'm still in all this fear. And one day on a Friday night, which was Fridays were very triggering for me because usually that's when the use started.
Right. The weekend thing.
Weekend. I was about to turn right into a Safeway parking lot to start I was going to get money out and then go buy my pipe and then go buy my, I had a ritual.
Yes.
And somehow I stopped myself before turning right, and I texted one of those women and I said, I think I need a sponsor. If I don't start doing some work on this stuff, I'm going to relapse. And she's like, I know just the guy for you. And I also need to say that part of my story is also when I was in that hospital, I had been diagnosed bipolar.
Right.
And,
and I share the same diagnosis.
Yeah. So I'm really sober, and I'm going through all that stuff anyway. Post-acute withdrawal syndrome, right?
Yes.
All the fogginess and irritability and mood swings and all that. And I'm bipolar. So I just wasn't very well. And, she introduced me to this man named David D. I think all I have to say is that name, and most people in this community will know who he is. And the thing that was great about him is that he was very connected in the sober community, and he took me literally everywhere with him. He was so proud of me, and so he just wanted to give me a family. And the best thing that he did for me was he made me go to a men's group with him on Thursday night.
Yep.
Now, remember, I don't like men, right? I mean, I like men, but I don't like men. And so I sat at this meeting the first time, and I gave him the stink eye, and, I was not having it. And then after the meeting ended, I very specifically said to him, how dare you make me do that? Don't ever ask me to do that again. And then I stormed off, right? Well, guess where I was the next Thursday?
Right there in
and
the
then
same
the next
seat.
Thursday,
Yep.
and then the next Thursday, and then the next thing that I knew, I was going on their retreat. They do a retreat 2 times a year. We go to Mexico and build a house for a family
Yes.
every
Oh, wow,
February.
giving
I
back.
started doing that. So then, I was totally ingrained in this. And what happened in that men's group was I started to come alive because what I needed those men to love me. And show me
In a
who I
healthy
really
way.
was. In a healthy way.
In a healthy way.
And it helped me become a man. And so that one meeting that Joan wanted me to go to literally became an everyday thing. Meetings, sponsoring, speaking, committees. I was doing something every day for my recovery. And that's when my life changed. At about 18 months of sobriety, I released my first book. It's called Unpacked Sparkle, and it is about Pac and the grief and Vegas and the getting sober. And once that happened, I started to have this like internal like struggle about what I was doing with my life. I was too sober to be at this corporate job that made me miserable, right?
Right.
And so at this point, I had a different sponsor, Stefan, Hope Dealer.
Love him.
See?
He was on here.
Oh, was he?
Yes, we had
Okay.
him on the podcast.
So, he and a friend of mine named Julie really together made me believe that if I had enough courage to take the first step to leave that job, that things would work out for me. And Stefan even said, there's gonna be an event that happens, and you're just gonna know that you're done. And sure enough, my boss acted a fool one day and was totally unreasonable. And I was like, it's not okay to treat me like this. And I did everything right. I gave notice. I got a party. Like usually when I leave a job, I get fired or walked out. Or This time I got a party, so it all worked out. But I left that job in November 2017, and I did not have a plan. But enter Dave D again, and he says, well, why don't you become a peer support? And I'm like, I knew that I was supposed to be helping people. I just didn't know what that looked like. So I did. I got my peer support certificate from Ren.
Yep.
And the best thing happened to me early in that is that I got offered a job right away at a fairly, it was a new treatment center at the time, but I was as a nighttime BHT, so I was working overnight, and that wasn't really great for my mental health. But I got fired from that job, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I knew even in that job, like here I had taken this big leap to leave this huge job where I was making a lot of money to go make like $14 an hour or whatever overnight and make myself crazy. I realized that to be what I really wanted to be, I was going to have to go to school.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So had I not gotten fired from that job, I don't know if I'd be a clinical lead at a treatment center now, right?
Right.
So what happens is I enroll in grad school at Grand Canyon University, and I get a job at LifeWell. So
Yep.
I was a peer support at LifeWell for about a year. I got promoted at LifeWell to case management. So I really got a good bird's eye view of like all kinds of different facets of the business, right? And I decided after, like when it was time for me to do my internship, I decided that I didn't want to overwhelm myself. I wanted to focus on that. And I also had this feeling that if I just focused on that, everything was going to work out. And what happened was I did my internship at Unhooked Recovery.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I got hired there as a therapist before I even had my master's degree.
That's wonderful.
So that's where I started.
Yeah.
I worked there for a year. I loved it there. I loved the clients there. I loved the work we did there. Unfortunately, Unhooked Recovery was about an hour away from where I live, and that
commute was just overwhelming.
was killing me. And I got my license at this time, and when I got my license, like this world opened up. To me.
Absolutely.
So part of my story is I want people to know that everybody wants to work in recovery, right? Go all the way. Get the degree, get the license, every door opens up. I got offered like 6 jobs when I got that license. And for the first time in my life, I was able to actually like choose. Like I didn't have to do something because I had to. I got to do something because I put myself in the position to choose, right?
And you wanted to, so that's amazing.
And so I ended up at the River Source. And I didn't even know, but they were opening up a new outpatient treatment center in the West Valley. And I live in the West Valley. I've always lived in the West Valley. And they basically made me the lead clinician of the joint. And so since October, I have been leading this facility. I went from peer support to the top dog at this place. So that's what happens when you do the work.
Yeah.
So the other thing that happened during this time is my parents both failed, right? And, it was actually right at the beginning of the pandemic when everything really hit the fan. Within the span of 6 weeks, all 3 of us were in the hospital for very serious reasons. And I knew that my dad fell in the garage. It was June. It was hot. Nobody found him for 2 hours. I was at work.
Oh, man.
My mom, I don't know where my mom was, but he sat on the ground for about 2 hours until he was found. And, you know, I went to the emergency room. They would only let me go in the emergency room then. It was June of COVID, right? 2020.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, this is it. He's never going to walk again. This is it. Like, and I knew enough to know that, like, when people with Parkinson's, like, have that final fall or whatever, that's when everything else goes too.
Yeah.
So I knew that my time with him was limited, and I knew that I needed to. It was one thing to apologize for showing up to his 75th birthday party high, or, you know, some of the, like, things I did. I really needed to make amends to him for not liking him my whole life. My Stefan really identified that. He's like, does he know that you don't like him? And I said, well, it's not like I'm going to tell him. And he's like, oh yes, you're going to tell him. You're going to go there. You're going to go there right now, and you're going to tell him, and you're going to call me when you're done. Click. And so I went and. Yeah,
Yep.
I had this conversation with my dad, and my dad was like, I know, and I don't really like you either. And so
there you go.
Wow.
And so that sounds really bad, but you know what? That moment of vulnerability between us actually ended all of that, and it opened up a door for us to start talking to each other. And the other thing about my dad is that he was not a man of faith. My dad didn't believe in anything. And
Okay.
I am, because I do
Right.
this deal, right? And I really felt like it was important to me to guide him toward God so that he would feel safe to die.
Yeah.
Because he was scared. Parkinson's basically eats away at your body. So at the end of his life, like, they flipped him over one day, and, like, there were, like, these tunnels in his skin.
Oh,
like, you could see
man.
his bone into like it through. Yeah.
I didn't know that that's what that looks
Yeah,
like.
and he was laying there in agony, and you know, I went there every week for it was a 9-month process from the fall to when he died, and I went there, and, you know, at first I went there and he would scream and yell at me like he always did, and I would go call Stefan crying, and then over time I just started showing up in strength, right? And so he would yell at me, and I would just stand there, and I would be stone, right? And I would show him grace, and then the next time I would go there, I would show him love, and then the next week I would go there and I would show him patience. And before time, this suit of armor that I had built around me with God and the fellowship and my life, he didn't yell at me anymore. Mm-hmm. He just saw a different person. And we started having these really intimate discussions about God. And, you know, this gut thing that we get here. So my birthday was on a I can't remember what day it was, but I always went to go see my dad on Sundays, and I got this gut feeling that I need to go see him on a Saturday. And so I went there. And the other thing that I should point out, during this time when my dad's deteriorating, he was also losing his mind too.
Yes.
Okay.
He was very demented.
Because it eats away at your brain too, doesn't it?
He was very paranoid, and he thought that he could come home, and that's what he was always yelling at me about. He's like, "Take me home," rah, rah. And I'm like, "How are you going to get around?" He's like, "I can lay on the floor." I'm like, "How are you going to go to the bathroom?" "I'll go to the bathroom on the floor." Like that's how.
'Cause, yeah.
He just wanted to come home.
Yeah.
And you know what? So this day I go there. It's a Saturday. I don't normally go there on Saturday, and somehow my dad is like right like this, like we're looking each other in the eye.
Coherent.
He's coherent. He's making sense. And he says to me, he says, "Patrick, I know that I'm going to die, but I don't want to die because I am enamored with the man that you have become, and I can't wait.
Oh my
I can't wait
gosh.
to see what you do next."
Well, he's seeing you now still.
Right? And so that was 2 weeks before he died, and then I went to go see him the next week, and this is when I saw the tunneling and all this stuff, and I just saw the agony in his face, and it was terrible. And I told the hospice nurse that they needed to put him on more pain medication, and she said, "Well, he'll die within a week if we do that." And I said, "Okay, it's time."
Yeah.
And so I went there. This week was crazy. So I was about to start a new job from all those job offers I got, and I was also chairing in our fellowship we do a 12-step in the Pines retreat every 2 years, and I was the
Yes.
chair of it.
Okay.
And so I'm going to go see my dad before I leave to go up north for this retreat, and you know, I took his hands in mine and we prayed, and the last words I heard from him were prayer. And my dad was not a believer, so for my dad to pray, isn't that amazing?
I got the shivers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what that vulnerability created, right? And so I'm up in Prescott at the retreat Friday night. We're sitting at dinner, and like all these people that I love are sitting around me, Stefan, BMO, like all these people. And I get this call from the hospice nurse, and she's like, Patrick, you're never going to believe your dad just told me that he made a deal with God that if he took him, he could be your guardian angel.
Oh my gosh.
And I had this moment of peace come over me because I knew that my dad was going to die, but I knew that he was going to die in a peaceful, godly way, and I knew that he was going to be okay.
Yeah.
And the retreat happened. I got word Sunday coming back that he was really bad. I was supposed to start. So there was a job in between Unhooked and RiverSource that wasn't a good fit. But so I was starting this job. This is like my start date, right? And I get the call that my dad had died. And I went to work. I went to my first day of work. I went from a guy who sat on the floor of the Palms Hotel on a Saturday night who was so messed up that he couldn't even enjoy a trip to Vegas and see his favorite singers in concert over a death to the kind of guy who can lead somebody to God and then show up at work the day they die and just live.
You know what's amazing about that is that with all the manipulation and the guys that had, totally abused you mentally, physically, even
All my life.
within your father as well, is that somehow you got to change someone to completely love who you are.
Yeah, I think
And
that what
you needed
happened.
that.
Oh, yes.
I think that what
That
happened
makes
is that
sense.
my dad saw me becoming a man, and I also need to share it because I'm a therapist and I think therapy is really valuable. And I was in therapy in this 9-month period when he was dying, and I had this aha moment in therapy where I realized that the reason why my dad had always been so mean to me had nothing to do with me.
Absolutely.
He wanted better for me. And his way of wanting better for me was unfortunately to be a dick, but
Right, right.
That's just how he loved. That's the only way he knew how to
And
love.
how was he loved?
He wasn't.
And that's it.
I found
So-
out, like, when I was doing research for my first book, like, one of the first things I wanted to do when I got sober was figure out how I got here. And I'm telling you, drug addiction and mental health stuff shakes every tree branch in my family.
Same.
I mean, I found out that my grandma had, what's that, electroshock therapy?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I found out that my grandpa, who I had never met because he had died before I was born, was an alcoholic.
Yep.
And that had contributed to his death. I didn't know that. I didn't know that I didn't really have a chance, right? And so, my mom struggles too. And my dad, I believe my dad was also mentally ill. He was very anxious, and a lot of his screaming and bellowing was mental illness
And probably fear.
and fear, lots of fear.
Lots of fear.
Yeah.
So tell us just a little bit, Patrick, about your books. So you wrote, the first one was about Pac, and
Yes.
a little bit too more about the grief that you suffered there with Pac as compared to the grief that you walked as a sober, amazing man of God through your dad's death.
So when Pac died, I didn't have any tools to really know how to deal with that. And I also was, into my addiction by this point. So I was doing the opposite of recovering from that. I was just exacerbating it, right?
Yeah.
Because I was using to fill this void and to, I was just in this weird, what the world's like when we're using, right? It's just, we end up with weird people in our house. And
Yes.
it's scary. And we put ourselves in just these really horrible situations. And, I spent a year and a half on the floor of my closet in my apartment, pushing a towel up against the crack of light at the bottom of the door because I didn't want anyone to see what I was doing, to the kind of guy who writes a book and tells everybody what happened and then knows. So here's the deal with my dad. Like, I knew from when Pac died, like, certain things that you feel. I felt, so there's 5 stages of grief, right?
Right.
So when did you think you gave your time to have grief over Pac? Like, how did you get through?
I didn't until I got sober.
Yeah.
So the 5 stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. They don't always flow in that order. It's all over the place. But because I was in like mega bargaining, like just questions upon questions, creating like just these big, like, you know what we do.
Yep.
I had this whole like CIA thing going on in my head about him. And, you know, like I had, you know, I just had all these grand ideas about what wasn't true.
Right.
You know, I knew who I was to him. I knew that he loved me. I knew that he chose me. You know, that was all real, but drugs made it seem fake or questionable. And then the more drugs you use, the more out there you get. I mean, I was not well, you know?
Right.
And so I knew, like, when I saw my dad in the ER that day after he had fallen, I knew that I didn't want to sit in that space of asking all those questions and feeling that way. You know, in my latest short story from this book called Time, it's actually about my dad's death. And I talk about the difference between being in a waiting room and being in the living room. And I think a waiting room, like when we are in a waiting room, it's fear, right? It paralyzes us. It doesn't let us live. It doesn't let us thrive. We just make bad decisions and we stop, right? And when we move into the living room, we actually get to make the choice to live. And I believe that I was standing firmly in the living room as my dad laid there, you know, watching me. You know, during that time, I got my master's and I got my licensure and I got all these job offers and I was interviewed on Brandon Lee's podcast. And every time I went to go see my dad, there was some big win that I was showing him that I had done. And my dad got to see me in this new way, right? And I really believe that it was because I showed up living that he was able to let go, because he didn't have to worry about me anymore. And so I think that what people need to do when they're facing grief, first of all, you need to talk about it, because we don't talk about it. But if you can, think about it in a way that is, it's not a waiting room, it's a living room.
Right.
I like that.
I like that too. That's awesome.
It's an opportunity to find joy. I found the greatest joy in my life from these deaths. If you remember my story, I was sobbing on the floor of this hallway in Vegas about all these people dying, and both these deaths in different ways created joy for me.
Right.
Yeah, the freedom.
So,
and guess what? That's what the people that we love want. They don't want us to be miserable and sitting on our floor doing drugs, pushing towels up against. They want us to stand in our light and show them who we are, right? This is our opportunity to sparkle. That's why I'm the Sparkle King, right?
Yes, that's right. So you wrote a children's book too. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So I've just always had this like vision that my Sparkle thing was my brand. And, you know, the first book is a self-help book. It's perfect for the audience that it's for, but you know, it's about drugs and stuff. So there's a demographic that probably shouldn't read that.
So what would you say the audience is then for your first book?
It's anybody that wants to find their way into the light, really. People that are recovering from mental illness, people that are recovering from grief, people that are recovering from drugs and alcohol. I basically wrote it for all the people that were broken like I was.
And struggling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then I thought, well, so I can tell my story in a lighter way. And my whole thing about the Sparkle is really about putting your hand out and showing someone else how to find their own, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so,
because you know how, show how. So.
Yeah. And I believe that all these things happened for me, not to me. All those sad, horrible things that I talked about happened for me so that I could live in my light and show other people how to live in my light. And so the children's book kind of introduces the concept of the Sparkle to a younger audience, because
and showing strength.
Yeah, because this book is about a gecko who's being bullied. Being bullied. Yes, he's being bullied in school, and through that bullying, it's actually a true story, but I changed it a little bit. When I was in third grade, so it was like 1983, 84, Michael Jackson was really popular, and my mom bought me this red and black jacket that looked just like the jacket he wore in the Thriller video.
Oh, nice.
And when I went to school, I thought
still remember
everyone
it.
was going to think that I was the shit. Well, they didn't like it, and they made fun of me.
Oh.
And it was like the worst day of my life. And I went home, 8 years old, sobbed, cried, told my mom, "How dare you make me wear this jacket?" And I decided on that day that I was never going to shine again, right? And when I came into recovery, I started wearing these sparkly shoes, and all these people started noticing me because of these shoes. And
I recognize you because of your shoes.
Right? And now I have like 15 pairs, 20 pairs, like whatever.
I'm telling
like,
you, the
You have
silver
way
sneakers
more. I
are the
know
best.
it.
The high tops.
every color, every size, whatever, right? It's a calling card of hope and love and light. And I don't have to hide and not be myself. So in the book, it's about a boy who's being bullied. He goes to school in these shoes. They make fun of the shoes. He says, "I'm never going to wear these again." And then his mom helps him realize that he sparkles because of the shoes, and the shoes show them who he is. And so my message is really, if you yourself and show people who you really are, people will actually love you, because what happens is he gets out of fear and he wears the shoes, and people start to respond to that. And that's what happened to me.
And he
Nice.
could, pretty much learn to love himself.
He learned to love himself. And
Yeah.
when you were able to fully love yourself, you were able to give that back to other people.
Exactly.
In a very intentional way.
Right.
So that was the second book. And then when I had about 3 years of recovery, I started thinking about topics that we think about when we have more recovery. Self-love, dropping the rock, character
Yep,
defects,
yep.
emotional sobriety, right? So I'm sober. I don't want to do drugs anymore. That's like out of my life. But like, how do I stay sober?
How do you live?
How do you live sober? And so a lot of things happened to me in a very short amount of time. At about 3 years, I called it the storm.
Yes.
And the storm actually happened to wipe away what no longer served me and create a new harvest. And so this book is about a very specific time in my life where a bunch of bad stuff happened that I got through sober and led me to school and my new career and all this stuff. So it's about that time and how I used the tools to get through it. And then the fourth is my short story about my dad's passing and how we worked.
Amazing. Are you working on another?
I
That'd be
did.
great.
I did actually last week start writing something. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
But I started writing. There are some things coming there's going to be more books, but there are some things that are coming that are bigger than anything I've even talked about, that are going to allow that to happen. So
Very nice.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of it's going to be about life after and, positive, amazing things.
So now
'Cause
you're
you're
working
amazing.
at River Source,
yes.
and that's on the west side.
It's on the west side. So our new outpatient treatment center, we do PHP and IOP, by the way. We are at 79th Avenue in Thomas.
Okay, go ahead and give out the phone number if somebody wants to reach out.
Then just call me, 602-318-7311.
Okay,
And
you guys.
I'll get them where they need to go.
And so we've been talking a lot about recovery here and that process. And obviously, this podcast is by Crossroads.
Yes.
So we do residential treatment and we do some IOP, sober living. We're going to be opening a detox.
We have a residential and a detox too. It's in Arizona City. And then so those clients feed into our two. Our first outpatient clinic is in Gilbert. And then they opened up this West Valley one. And it's been slow kind of because it's new, but we're starting to pick up. Actually, in the last week, we have our highest census right now.
Okay.
Right.
So
and
it's-
that's
yeah.
kind of the same thing that's going on with us is because we have Crossroads at Pure Heart, which is intensive outpatient and trauma. And we
Yeah.
have somebody there that does EMDR.
I
So-
do EMDR too. I
Nice.
got certified last year also.
Yeah.
So right around the time that I started this job, I did my EMDR stuff. So I am offering EMDR therapy in the West Valley.
That's wonderful.
So
And so are we
yeah.
at Crossroads. So, hey, you guys, you've been hearing from Patrick Roland. He's told you a little bit about River Source. And for Crossroads, if you guys need help, then we can help you if you need to come into treatment. So look us up on our website, thecrossroadsinc.org. Admissions is 602-263-5242. So, one of the things that Patrick and I talked a little bit about before we started this podcast is about recovery. There's a lot of places out there that can help you. And I don't think either one of us care where you go as long as you go. I mean, we are not in a competition here. We are in the business to save lives. So if you guys need help, contact Crossroads, contact River Source. We don't really care. Let's just try to get you in someplace and get you some help.
And what I've really noticed as I've been a therapist and as I have worked with other drug addicts is there is usually something related to grief that happens that makes us go over the edge. There's some kind of death or loss or whatever it is. There's a moment where things change, right? And if you can go to treatment and be open and vulnerable and go there, you can actually get through some of these things that you never thought you could.
Right, exactly. And I agree with you. And I think that it is important what you just said about the grief process is it's not just because somebody passes away or transitions.
Sometimes it's a loss of a job or a
relationship.
Marriage or
There's so many other things about grief, you guys. So, I mean, if you're feeling down, reach out for some help.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my grief and things like that came from sexual, abuse and rapes and molestation. So I grieved maybe in a different way, but, I got through it, Crossroads was everything to me, and figuring out later in life that I identify trans was like the light at the end of the tunnel. I really feel like that I can have a platform to maybe help and empower, youth or the community in general, because I don't think I want anyone to live the life that, I had growing up or be sad and be in pain and not feel like you belong anywhere, uncomfortable in your own skin. There were times where, I didn't love anything about me, and it stemmed from even my skin color, the way people and society looked at my gay communities, and it was just really hard for me. I think
what the magic is though is that everything that you just said that was dark, that's actually your sparkle.
That's what makes me
actually
stronger
who
now.
you are and makes you so beautiful.
Yeah.
So if you can lean into that pain and make it your power, there's no telling what you can accomplish in this sober life, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is that both of you guys in your own ways, and I've seen you, Dulce, at the kitchen that you work at Crossroads, how you can make a smile happen, how you can make somebody feel better. He brought me this amazing bread that Rosie made. And I was like, yes, he's thinking about me. It was fantastic. So, and you, Patrick, with all that you're doing, this is what we need is we need to drop some of these barriers that are keeping people from going and getting help. We need to try to give more places for people to go. Quit the competition thing. There's enough people that need help for everybody out there.
Every single person was born with their own sparkle, right? And it is, if we come here and we do the work and we show up, we find it.
Yes.
And then we get to give that light to everyone around us, right?
Yeah.
You found yours, I found mine, you found, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're all here because we're all unique, special, glorious, beautiful, resilient people that fought to find ourselves.
Yes.
And we get to use that light then to create a path for others to find themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
We need to show up exactly as we are because the world needs us, who we are.
And I believe that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It has been such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank
and
you.
You're sparkling right now, dude.
Exactly.
It's been amazing. And Dulce, thank you so much for coming and helping me out. This was such an amazing show. Thank you so, so much. And until next time.
Thanks for listening to Recovery on Air, the official podcast of Crossroads Addiction Rehabilitation with your host, Donna Alexander. Join us next time as we continue our candid discussions about addiction and recovery. Listen 24/7 anytime to this or any of our shows online at starworldwidenetworks.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.